The night sky is never truly dark above Lake Maracaibo. For centuries, lightning has carved the heavens open, striking thousands of times each night. Yet thunder never follows. Villages whisper of spirits locked in endless battle. Conquistadors wrote of faces burning in the flashes, and scientists measure power beyond reason, only to vanish into silence. This is no ordinary storm. It has burned longer than empires, outlasted kings, and swallowed those who dare to name it. Some call it a beacon, others a curse. But all agree on one truth: the storm is alive. And as you listen now, its fire still watches, its silence still waits. There's a place on this earth where the night is never truly dark, where shadows refuse to stretch, and silence cannot take hold, where the heavens themselves seem torn open, and light rains endlessly down in jagged fury. On the northern edges of Venezuela, where the mighty Catatumbo River empties into the vast basin of Lake Maracaibo, a storm is born each evening. Not a passing storm, not a fleeting display of thunder and rain, but an unending theater of fire, a storm that refuses to die. Its lightning ignites the sky for hours, every single night, repeating without mercy. Flashes fall upon the water and the land with such persistence that locals say you could read a book at midnight without a single candle. It is as though the sky has sworn never to sleep. This storm has burned above Lake Maracaibo for centuries, older than the empires that once rose and fell along its shores. It is no ordinary storm. It does not wander across the continent. It does not fade into dawn like other tempests. It stays rooted to this place, anchored to these waters, chained to this ancient land. Every few seconds, the sky cracks open in blinding white and violet light. Lightning tears across the horizon, carving patterns no human hand could draw. Yet, despite the violence above, the thunder is strangely muted, a distant rumble swallowed by the air. The silence is more unsettling than the sound, as if the heavens are screaming, but the world refuses to listen. To witness it is to feel awe. To live beneath it is to feel cursed. Generations of fishermen on Lake Maracaibo have grown old beneath this light, their skin weathered by sun and storm, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. They whisper of the storm as though it were alive, as though it were watching. No one dares curse it aloud. No one dares ask why it never ends. For to question it too loudly is to invite it closer. The elders say it has burned since before memory itself, before their ancestors carved stories into rock and bone. Some claim it began when gods were angered, punishing the people who once dared to live too proudly by the lake. Others believe the storm was a warning, a beacon to remind the living that the land they stand upon is borrowed, fragile, and never fully theirs. Yet not all who tell the story agree. For some, the storm is not a punishment at all. It is a gate, a signal fire that connects the earth to something beyond the sky. In the chronicles of explorers who came centuries ago, Lake Maracaibo appears again and again. When Spanish ships cut through the Caribbean and hunted the Venezuelan coast, they saw the storm long before they saw the land. To them, it was a lighthouse, a beacon that lit the way through treacherous waters. They charted it on maps, their ink careful and deliberate, marking the lake not just as geography, but as something stranger, something to be both used and feared. But the storm was not always merciful to these outsiders. Records whisper of nights when ships vanished beneath its glow. Crews who swore the light itself was blinding them, pulling them off course, luring them into shallow waters where their hulls splintered against stone. A storm that guides by night could also deceive. The conquistadors who stepped ashore and gazed upon the endless lightning described it in their journals with awe, but also unease. They spoke of patterns in the sky, bolts that seemed to strike the same place again and again, as though drawn by design. One soldier wrote that in the light of the storm, he saw faces, not human, but pale, elongated visages that flickered into existence only for an instant, vanishing before he could be sure. Another recorded that his men heard whispers when the flashes came close, voices and languages they could not understand, carried on the restless winds. Those journals survived. Their words remain. And in those words, a phrase repeated, "The storm is alive." For the people of the lake, the storm is not just a backdrop. It is their inheritance, their constant companion. Children grow up beneath skies that never sleep, their dreams lit by lightning that slips through cracks in their windows. Lovers walk the shores at night under a flickering dome of light, shadows vanishing and reappearing in endless rhythm. The storm watches every birth, every prayer, every death. It is present at every moment, a witness none can escape. And yet there is sorrow in its presence. Farmers whose crops wither under endless nights of unnatural glow. Fishermen who whisper that each flash calls something from beneath the waters, something that takes more than it gives. Mothers who beg the storm to rest, if only for a single night, so their children can know true darkness. But it does not rest. It has never rested. Some of the elders say the storm feeds on pain, that it grows brighter in times of suffering, hungrier when blood spills on the shores. They speak of wars long ago, when tribes fought beneath its endless sky, and how the lightning burned fiercer, striking down both victor and vanquished alike. The storm, they say, does not take sides. It only consumes. There is a legend, older than the Spanish, older than the tribes who still call the lake home. It tells of a people who once lived in a city upon the water. Their homes shone with bronze and stone. Their temples rose like mountains above the marshes. They believed themselves untouchable. They dared to build a tower, climbing toward the heavens. But the gods, angered by such pride, shattered their city with fire from the sky. The storm has burned ever since, a reminder etched into the very bones of the earth. When lightning cracks above Lake Maracaibo, the people say it is the echo of that punishment, a wound that never healed. The city sank beneath the waters, its temples now drowned, but the sky remembers. Every night, the storm returns to remind mankind of what happens when mortals defy the heavens. Yet some whisper another version. They say the city was not destroyed, but changed. That in the moment the lightning struck, it crossed into another world, a reflection of itself beneath the lake. And each flash of a storm is not destruction, but a window, a glimpse of that hidden city, still burning, still trapped between worlds. To the modern mind, there are scientific explanations. The geography of the region, the collision of warm trade winds with the cool air from the Andes, the methane that seeps from the marshes. Scientists measure the conditions, chart the patterns, and declare that the storm is nature's machine, predictable, logical, even useful as a natural lighthouse. Yet even those who come with instruments and theories admit to something unnerving when they stand beneath it. In the stillness before a flash, the air is heavy, suffocating, as though time itself is holding its breath. The lightning comes not as a surprise, but as inevitability, like the turning of a clock. The ground trembles though there is no thunder. And in those moments of endless repetition, even the rational mind begins to wonder, is this truly only weather? Or is it ritual? Travelers who have stood at the shores of the lake tell of strange feelings that cling to them long after they leave. Dreams that do not belong to them. Memories of places they have never seen. They describe hearing voices when lightning strikes. Voices that are neither male nor female, human nor beast, but something older, deeper, filled with both sorrow and rage. One traveler swore that as he looked into the storm, he saw not the sky, but eyes staring back at him. Thousands of eyes, watching from beyond the veil of light. He left the lake that same night and never returned. Another fell to madness, wandering through towns claiming the storm was a messenger. That each bolt carried warnings written in fire, warnings that humanity was too blind to read. He drew symbols on walls, symbols that glowed eerily when lightning struck, then faded into ash. His end was not recorded. Some say he drowned himself in the lake, others that the storm itself claimed him. Yet the storm remains unbroken, untamed. Centuries have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. Wars have swept across nations, and still the sky above Lake Maracaibo burns each night. Its light has outlasted kings, tribes, and the very maps on which it was first drawn. There is no sign it will ever end. And perhaps that is the most haunting part. For all things on earth are meant to die, but what lives above Maracaibo refuses to. The elders say it is because the storm is not bound by earth at all, that it belongs to something else, something that does not measure time as we do. The storm does not live in years or centuries. It lives in eternity. And so the people endure. Each night, they look to the heavens and see the endless fire. Each night, they wonder what it means, what it hides, what it remembers. Children are born beneath its glow. The old take their final breaths with its flashes on their faces. And the storm watches, relentless, indifferent. It is said that if you stand by the water long enough, if you let the storm wash over you without blinking, you may catch a glimpse of the truth. Not in the first hour or the second, but in the long, endless repetition when a mind begins to lose its grip on time. Then perhaps you will see what the conquistadors saw, what the tribes feared, what the lost travelers whispered before they vanished. That the storm is not weather. It is not chance. It is not mercy. It is alive. The storm was eternal, a heartbeat in the sky that refused to still. For centuries it raged above Lake Maracaibo, marking Venezuela's northern horizon with an unending glow. To the native people, it was a god's punishment, a spirit's fire, or a scar left upon the world. But to those who came later, to the wanderers of the sea, to the empires that rose from across the Atlantic, the storm became something else. It became a sign, a beacon, a map etched not on paper, but into the heavens themselves. In the 16th century, when wooden ships carried conquistadors across waters they scarcely understood, the storm was already there. Sailors spoke of it long before they reached shore. They called it the lighthouse of Catatumbo, a fire that guided them through the Caribbean night. Its glow was visible for hundreds of miles. And yet, for all its brilliance, it was no simple gift. For some, the light was salvation. For others, it was doom. Maps of the early colonial age recorded the storm as faithfully as rivers and mountains. Mariners trusted its constant glow. When clouds blotted out the stars, when the seas roared and their compasses faltered, they looked to the south, where the sky above Maracaibo blazed like a torch. Sail toward the light, they said, and the lake will find you. But what awaited those who sailed too near was not always the promise of safe harbor. The first maps that survive are filled with contradictions. Spanish cartographers drew the glow above the lake, marking it as a fixed point, as though it were as natural as a mountain range. Yet the symbols they used were strange. Some drew it as a starburst, lines reaching in all directions. Others marked it as a flame, black ink curling like smoke. And in some rare, forgotten charts, the storm was drawn as an eye, one unblinking, staring across the seas. Sailors feared the lake even as they relied on it. They whispered of nights when a lightning grew so violent it blinded them, burning their eyes with visions. Crews told of ships that strayed too close and never returned. Some claimed the water itself opened to swallow them whole, dragged beneath by unseen currents. Others swore the storm twisted their compasses and led them into reefs where their ships splintered like bones. And always, survivors said the same thing. The light was not merely above them. It was pulling them. In the great libraries of Madrid and Seville, yellowing documents remain. Journals, weathered maps, letters smudged by the hands of men who crossed an ocean and returned half-broken. They described the same phenomenon, a storm that burned without end, a storm that guided their sails, a storm that spoke. One navigator wrote that as he charted the glow, he noticed its flashes aligned with the constellations. It seemed to answer the stars themselves, striking in rhythm, like a conversation between heaven and earth. Another wrote that in the storm's flashes he could see entire coastlines illuminated, as though the lightning revealed a different map, one more true than any man could draw. He claimed the storm showed him islands that should not exist, lands not found on any chart. He returned to Spain with sketches, markings of archipelagos his ship never visited, yet he swore they were real. His peers dismissed him as fevered, his mind broken by storms and sea salt. But his drawings were kept tucked away in the corners of maps, copied in secret by apprentices who believed him. The strange thing about those old charts is not merely the storm's presence, but its permanence. Natural storms are fleeting. They vanish with the turning of seasons. Yet here, in every chart across centuries, the storm is fixed, eternal, unchanging. To cartographers, it became a landmark as reliable as any mountain. And yet, unlike mountains, it was alive, moving, unpredictable. To place it on a map was an act of defiance, to draw the shape of something that was never still. Some cartographers, perhaps uneasy, refused to draw it plainly. They used symbols, notations borrowed from alchemy, circles crossed with jagged lines, shapes that hinted more at curses than at weather. They marked the storm as if it were not a phenomenon, but a warning, a place where the natural world bled into something else. One map, discovered centuries later in a monastery, was unlike the others. Inked in careful strokes, it showed the Venezuelan coast in detail. But where Lake Maracaibo should be, there was no lake at all. Instead, there was only a spiral, black and unending, as though the cartographer had tried to draw motion itself. Above it, in bold letters, he had written a single phrase, Lux Aeterna, eternal light. Beneath the phrase, faint, almost erased, was another word. A word not in Spanish, not in Latin, but older. A word no one has ever translated. Legends grew. Sailors told of ghost ships drifting within the storm's glow, of lanterns moving across the water where no crew existed, of voices calling from the flashes, tempting men to steer closer, to let the light consume them. They said the storm was both map and trap, showing the way but demanding a price. There were stories of entire fleets lured into its glow. Dutch ships during the Wars of Empire, their hulls swallowed by waters no diver has ever found. Pirates who boasted of using the storm to track Spanish galleons, only to vanish beneath its lightning themselves. Each tale ended the same way, with disappearance, with silence, with loss. The storm gave, but it also took. In some archives lies a letter written by a Franciscan friar who traveled with conquistadors to the lake. He described how the storm lit their path at night, guiding them toward the indigenous settlements. But he also described something more. He wrote that as he watched the storm, he began to see shapes in the glow. Not clouds, not bolts, but figures. He claimed they were towers, rising in the distance, built not by human hands, but by fire itself. He told the superiors that the storm was no act of God, but a city of light trapped in the sky. The letter was never officially acknowledged, but in the margins of maps copied years later, faint sketches of towers appeared, drawn by men who had never seen the storm themselves, yet who whispered of the friar's visions. As the centuries passed, the storm remained. Empires fell, pirates roamed and vanished. Ships turned from wood to steel. Yet every navigator, every captain who drew a map of the Caribbean marked it the same way. A blaze of light above the lake, a fire that could not be ignored. But then came the stories that shook even the boldest sailors. The stories of maps that should not exist. In the early 1700s, a merchant vessel sailed from Maracaibo to Havana, carrying goods and documents. It never arrived. Years later, its wreck was found on a reef far from its intended path. Among the debris, waterlogged and half erased, was a chart unlike any known. On this chart, the storm was not marked as light. It was marked as a sigil, a twisted symbol, almost serpentine, drawn not with the cartographer's neat lines, but with jagged, frantic strokes. Beneath it, a single word had been written, male dictum. Cursed, the map vanished into private hands. Some say it was burned by priests who feared its meaning. Others claim it still exists, hidden in a vault where only a few have seen it. But those who claim to have glimpsed it whisper the same thing. The symbol was not of weather. It was of something else, something ancient, something that did not belong to the earth. And so the storm, eternal and unyielding, became not only a landmark but a mystery too deep to ignore. Why did the cartographers of the old world, men trained in precision and discipline, abandon their measured lines to mark it with symbols of curses? Why did maps surface that showed not geography, but warnings? Why did sailors, hardened by oceans, tremble when they saw its glow? Perhaps it was only fear. Perhaps it was the human mind trying to make sense of nature's fury. But perhaps, just perhaps, the storm is not only a storm. Perhaps it is a sign burned into the world, a reminder written across centuries in ink, in lightning, in blood. The maps remain, some in museums, some lost, some whispered about in dark corners of libraries. They tell us what men saw, what they feared, what they tried to contain with symbols. But there is one map, one chart that none can dismiss. It surfaced in the last century, its origins uncertain, its ink faded, but its meaning clear. It showed the Venezuelan coast, the Great Basin of Maracaibo. And above the lake, instead of light, instead of a flame, instead of an eye, was a symbol none had dared before. A circle broken by a jagged line, marked not with the name of a storm, but with a single word. Not light, not weather, not God, but curse. Long before the ships of Spain carved their way across the Caribbean, long before the conquistadors marked the storm of Maracaibo on their maps, before charts, before letters, before ink itself touched parchment, the storm was already there, and the people who lived beneath its glow had already given it a name. They called it the fire of the sky, the eternal flame, the breath of the spirits. For the Bari and the Wayu, the storm was not an accident. It was not weather. It was the voice of the gods. The heavens cracked each night, not because of air or water, but because something was trapped above them. Something ancient, something restless. Their legends speak of spirits locked in an endless war, bound by the sky itself. Some say they were once brothers, mighty guardians of the world, who quarreled over mankind. One believed humanity should be nurtured, guided, and taught. The other believed humanity was a mistake, a reckless creation of flesh and greed. Their battle split the heavens. Neither could win, neither could fall. And so, they fought forever, striking one another with endless bolts of fire, their war written each night across the lake. Others tell a different story, that the storm was punishment, that once long ago, the people of the lake had defied the gods. They had built towers too high, sung songs too proud, claimed too much of the earth as their own. In their arrogance, they forgot the sky was not theirs to claim. And so the spirits descended, tearing the night with fire to remind mortals of their place. The storm, the elders said, is the scar of that punishment, a scar that never closes. But perhaps the most haunting tale is the one told in hushed voices around dying fires. That the storm is not punishment at all. It is a warning, a signal sent not to humans, but to the world beyond the stars. Each flash is a beacon, calling out across eternity, summoning something that has not yet arrived. The Bari and the Wayu live close to the earth, their lives tied to water, to sky, to land. They know the sound of the wind, the taste of rain, the smell of earth before storms. To them, the lightning of Maracaibo is alive. They describe it not as light, but as breath, a great spirit exhaling above them. Children are taught from birth never to laugh at the storm, never to curse it, never to point. They are told to bow their heads when it strikes. To look too long into its heart is to invite its attention. And once it sees you, it never forgets. Some families pass down stories of loved ones who went mad beneath its glow. Hunters who wandered too close to the marsh at night and returned with hollow eyes, whispering of voices in the flashes. Mothers who woke screaming, claiming the storm had entered their dreams and shown them lands on fire, cities of stone shattering beneath endless light. The tribes accepted the storm as they accepted death, a truth, a shadow, a force greater than themselves. But they did not always remain silent before it. There are stories, carried like ash in the wind, of rituals performed to calm the storm. The Bari and the Wayu both tell of elders who gathered their people, painting their faces with soot, weaving chants into the night air. They would burn offerings of maize and blood, casting them into the waters, begging the spirits to rest. For there were nights when the storm burned too fiercely, when the flashes grew so constant the sky seemed to melt. On such nights, fear took root in every heart, and the people wondered if the heavens had finally decided to descend. One ritual, more whispered than told, spoke of a circle carved into the earth. Inside it, 7 chosen ones stood, their bodies painted in patterns of ash and crimson. They sang to the storm, not in prayer, but in challenge. They demanded it cease, demanded the spirits in their war. The chants rose with the lightning, each verse climbing higher until the ground trembled beneath their feet. Witnesses claimed the storm grew still. For the first time, silence fell upon the lake. The lightning froze, as though the heavens themselves were listening. But silence is not always mercy. When the lightning returned, it struck the circle. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. And when the people ran to see, the 7 who had chanted were gone. Not burned, not broken. Gone. The circle remained. The ash remained. But the singers had vanished. Some say they were taken into the storm. Others say the spirits dragged them beneath the waters. No one knows. From that night on, the elders forbade the ritual. They said the storm cannot be challenged. It cannot be calmed. To stand against it is to disappear. For centuries, the Bari and the Wayu have carried these stories. They are written not in books, but in memory, in song, in scars passed from one generation to the next. To outsiders, they seem like myths, like superstition. But for those who live beneath the storm, they are truth. And even those who doubt the legends cannot ignore the evidence of sorrow. Graves filled with those who drowned on nights when the storm grew fiercest. Villages abandoned when lightning struck again and again in the same place, as if deliberately targeting the living. Families who still weep for loved ones lost to the storm's strange hunger. There is pain in the telling, but there is also reverence. For though the storm takes, it also gives. Its light has guided hunters through the marsh at night. Its glow has warned fishermen of reefs and rocks. Its endless fire has protected villages from intruders, for even pirates feared to anchor too near its glow. The people of the lightning know it is both curse and guardian, both terror and gift. The Wayu tell of a night when a Spanish galleon approached the lake, seeking to raid their villages. The storm burned brighter than ever, lightning falling so thick the sky itself turned white. The ship never reached shore. In the morning, only splinters of its hull floated on the water. The villagers claimed the storm itself defended them. That night, they lit fires along the shore in thanks, calling out into the storm, "You are our guardian and our curse." The Bari tell another tale, darker, sadder, of a family who fled the storm's wrath, carrying their newborn into the mountains. They hid for days, but the lightning followed. When they returned, their village was gone, reduced to ash and silence. They buried the infant beneath a tree, believing the storm had claimed its soul. To this day, some Bari families still tie small offerings to the branches of trees, whispering to the storm not to take their children. These are not myths to them. These are memories, wounds carved into the earth. Anthropologists who visited the tribes in the 20th century dismissed the legends as stories told to explain the unexplainable. Yet even the researchers confessed unease. One wrote that when he asked about the storm, the elders grew silent, their faces hardening with fear. "It is not for us to speak," they told him. "The storm listens." Another recorded dreams of his own after nights by the lake. Visions of faces in the sky, voices calling his name in tongues he did not understand. He left after a single week, never to return. The Bari and the Wayu believe the storm remembers, that every scream, every prayer, every song offered beneath it is carried in its light. That is why their rituals are careful, why their words are measured. To live beneath the storm is to be watched, always by eyes you cannot see. There's one story, told only in whispers, of a time when the storm was nearly silenced, when the elders believed they had found a way to end it forever. They gathered their strongest shamans, men and women whose bloodlines stretched back to the first fires. They carried relics of bone and stone, artifacts said to be carved before the first lightning fell. For 3 nights, they fasted, drinking only from the lake itself. On the 4th night, they stood upon the shore, their bodies painted with ash, their voices raised in song. Witnesses said the storm faltered. The sky grew dark. For the first time in memory, the lake was wrapped in true night. The stars appeared above, pure and sharp. Children wept to see them, for they had never known such darkness. But the silence did not last. The storm returned in a single, endless strike, a bolt that split the sky in two. And when the light faded, the shamans were gone. Not bodies, not ashes, only empty space where they had stood. The people fled, terrified. The elders declared the ritual forbidden. From that day forward, no one dared try again. The storm could not be silenced. It could only be endured. And so the Bari and the Wayu live, as they always have, beneath the fire of the sky. They tell their children to bow their heads, to whisper their prayers, to never draw the storm's gaze. They know it is alive. They know it watches. They know it remembers. And though outsiders laugh, though scientists speak of methane and winds, those who have lived beneath the lightning know better. They know the storm is more than weather. It is spirit. It is memory. It is war. And sometimes it takes. The storm had always belonged to the people of the lake. The Bari, the Wayu, the tribes who lived in its glow and feared its endless hunger. They told their children it was alive. They sang to it in whispers. They mourned those it had taken. For them, the storm was both curse and guardian, and they lived beneath it as one lives beneath an unblinking sky. But when the ships of Spain arrived, sails heavy with ambition and greed, the storm found new witnesses. Witnesses who did not bow, who did not whisper, who believed the world was theirs to take. And to those who dared to gaze upon it without fear, the storm revealed something far more terrible. The conquistadors first saw the glow from the sea. For weeks they had sailed through waters that stretched endlessly, guided by nothing but stars and crude compasses. But then, on the horizon, they saw a fire in the sky. At first they thought it was a great blaze on land, villages burning in the night. But as they drew nearer, the fire did not fade. It spread, covering the heavens in flashes of white and violet. They stood on their decks and watched in awe as the storm carved the sky apart. Lightning leapt from cloud to cloud. Bolts fell into the lake with violent beauty, and the night was turned to day again and again. To men who had never seen such fury, it seemed divine. Some fell to their knees in prayer. Others lifted their swords high, shouting that God himself had lit the path for them. But wonder is a fragile thing. It does not last, and soon all turned to fear. The 1st Battalions marched to the shores of Maracaibo, setting camp beneath the storm's glow. They built fires, drove stakes into the soil, and told themselves that the light above was a sign of their conquest. Yet from the first night, unease spread among them. Soldiers reported strange shadows cast by the lightning. Not the shadows of trees or tents, but shapes that moved where nothing stood. When the flashes struck, the ground glowed with silhouettes of figures standing in the marsh, tall, gaunt, their heads crowned with flame. Yet when the light faded, there was nothing there. Men who tried to sleep woke screaming. They claimed the storm had entered their dreams, filling their minds with visions of faces half-burned, eyes that glowed white, mouths whispering words they could not understand. Some awoke clawing at their own throats, gasping as though drowning in invisible water. And in the day, when the storm still lingered faintly, the men's eyes betrayed them. They saw movement in the distance, shapes along the water, but when they ran to investigate, only reeds swayed in silence. The conquistadors were men hardened by war. They had crossed oceans, slain armies, toppled empires. Yet the storm unsettled them in ways no battle ever had. For war is a matter of flesh and steel, of wounds and blood. The storm was something else. It was unseen, untouchable, and yet it reached into their minds, their hearts, their dreams. One captain wrote in his journal that he saw drowned faces in the lightning. Not fleeting, not imagined, but clear, as though souls were trapped within the bolts themselves. He described men and women with mouths open in eternal screams, their hair floating like they were submerged in water, their eyes staring directly at him. Another soldier claimed that as he patrolled the shoreline, the flashes illuminated bodies half submerged in the marsh. Pale hands reached from the water, grasping at the air. Yet when the lightning faded, the marsh was empty. He refused to leave his tent after that night. Whispers grew. The storm was not a sign of God, they said, but of something else. Something watching them. Something mocking their arrogance. The indigenous people had warned them. The Wayuu told them not to camp too close, not to raise their fires beneath the storm's heart. But the Spaniards laughed. They believed themselves chosen, protected by their faith and their steel. They ignored the warnings, and the storm took notice. One night, a battalion camped at the edge of the lake. They posted guards, stacked their muskets, and tried to sleep beneath the flashes. But as midnight fell, the lightning grew faster, more violent, until the sky itself seemed to pulse. The men awoke to a soundless terror. In the flashes, they saw their own camp distorted. Tents stretched into shapes that weren't theirs. Men standing who should have been asleep. Faces staring back that weren't their own. Some swore they saw entire armies marching in the distance. Ghostly battalions illuminated by fire. Marching not toward them, but through them. The soldiers panicked. Muskets fired into empty night. Blades swung at shadows. In the chaos, one man vanished. His bedroll was found empty, his musket on the ground, his footprints ending in the mud. But there was no blood, no struggle, nothing. The next morning, the commander demanded order. He told the men they had been deceived by fear, that the storm was only light, only weather. Yet when he reached for his journal to write his report, he found words already written that he did not remember writing. It watches us. The conquistadors began to fear their own minds. Some refused to look at the lightning, covering their eyes with cloth. Others stayed awake all night, terrified of the dreams that came when they closed their eyes. The storm wore them down, not with rain or fire, but with doubt, with terror that crept into their thoughts and whispered that they did not belong. And still, they pressed onward, for they were not men who turned back. Gold drove them, glory drove them, empire drove them. They told themselves the storm was a trial, a test of their resolve. Yet each step they took was watched, each prayer they whispered drowned by the endless light. As weeks turned to months, entire battalions began to write of the same thing. The same shadows, the same whispers, the same faces in the flashes. Their words, copied and preserved, survive to this day. And in those words lies a truth they dared not speak aloud. The storm was alive. Historians argue over the journals. Some dismiss them as fear-born ramblings, the delusions of men far from home, plagued by fever and exhaustion. But the consistency of their words cannot be ignored. Different battalions, different years, different men, yet the same descriptions, the same visions. One chilling record tells of a soldier who walked into the lake at night. His comrade shouted, begged him to return, but he walked calmly, step by step, until the water swallowed him. Lightning struck again and again around him, but never touched his body. When the lake closed over his head, he did not surface. In the morning, they found his armor lying on the shore, polished and dry, as though it had never touched water. Another account describes an entire watch patrol disappearing. For men sent to guard the camp never returned. Their tracks led into the marsh, but ended abruptly, as though the earth itself had erased them. That night, when lightning struck, the remaining soldiers swore they saw 4 faces in the glow above them, staring down with hollow eyes. The conquistadors called themselves masters of the New World. They claimed lands, enslaved peoples, plundered gold. But beneath the storm of Maracaibo, their arrogance crumbled. They were not masters here. They were intruders, witnesses unwelcome beneath a sky that had burned long before them and would burn long after. Some tried to leave, but even in retreat, the storm followed. Ships that sailed from the lake carried its light with them, its glow visible on the horizon long after they should have been free. Men whispered that once you looked into the storm, once it saw you, you could never escape. That it would follow you in dreams, in reflections, in shadows. The Spaniards feared little in this world, but they feared the storm, and yet they could not look away. The journals are filled with contradictions, awe and terror, devotion and dread. Some believed the storm was the wrath of their God, punishing them for their sins. Others believed it was the devil himself, laughing at their conquest. But all agreed on one thing. The storm was not weather. It was something else, something alive. And in the end, entire battalions wrote the same words, words carved into journals, scratched into wood, whispered in the dark. The storm watches us. The storm above Lake Maracaibo has never been silent. Night after night, for centuries beyond memory, it has carved the heavens open with fire. To the eyes of science, it is methane and moisture winds colliding with the Andes. To the Bari and Wayu, it is the voice of gods and spirits, a punishment or a warning. To the conquistadors, it was an omen, a terrible light that watched them with eyes they could not name. But there is another story, a story that does not speak of nature or of men, but of war. Not war fought with steel, but with the very fabric of the heavens. A war between gods, fought so violently that its echoes still burn across the night sky. Across cultures, scattered across centuries, there are myths that speak of battles above the world. Sumerian tablets whisper of gods locked in endless conflict, storms as their weapons. The Greeks told of Zeus striking his enemies from the sky with thunderbolts forged in divine fire. In Norse sagas, Thor's hammer split the heavens with lightning, shattering giants and serpents alike. The Mayas spoke of the sky serpent, whose coils crackled with fire, a beast whose battles with the sun birthed storms. Always across lands that never touched, the story repeats. Fire falls from the sky, gods fight above the earth, and humanity is left trembling beneath their war. So what if the storm of Maracaibo is not merely weather? What if it is the remnant of such a war, the scar of a battle so immense it could never be forgotten? The Wayo have a tale. They say that once the sky was whole, clear and eternal, a great dome that covered the world in peace. But two spirits, born of the heavens, grew jealous of one another. One loved the light, the rising sun, the order of day. The other loved the dark, the hidden whispers of night. At first they balanced one another, day flowing into night, night into day. But over time, their love turned to hatred. They clashed, and the sky itself cracked. Their weapons were not of wood or steel, but fire. Bolts of white light, thunder that shook the bones of the earth. For 7 days and nights they fought. The rivers boiled, the mountains split, the marshes bled. The people begged them to stop, but the spirits were deaf to prayer. When the battle ended, neither had won. Both were wounded, both were trapped, and the sky was torn forever. Their war did not cease. It was frozen, locked above Lake Maracaibo. And it has burned every night since, an eternal battle that no one can end. The Bari tell a different version. They say the war was not between two spirits, but between gods and men. That once, humanity grew too bold, claiming knowledge of the heavens, daring to steal secrets not meant for them. The gods descended, armed with fire, to destroy the tower mankind had built. But the humans resisted. They called upon their own spirits, their ancestors, and raised their voices in defiance. The sky turned black. Lightning fell without end. Entire villages were consumed in white fire. Forests burned, rivers boiled. The gods could not crush mankind completely, but mankind could not stand against such power. So the battle ended in stalemate, its fury trapped in the air itself. The lightning became eternal. a memory of war that still burns above the lake. To this day, the Bari say, the storm is not random. It is the gods reminding mankind of the battle we lost, a wound reopened each night so we never forget. And yet, it is not only the Bari and Wayu who whisper of such wars. In manuscripts from Europe, long forgotten, there are strange echoes of the same belief. A Jesuit priest who lived among the tribes of Venezuela in the 1600s wrote of a fire in the heavens that recalls the Great Rebellion. He described the storm not as punishment, but as remembrance, a reminder of a war long past. He compared it to tales from the old world. The fall of Lucifer, cast down from heaven in bolts of fire, his struggle still echoing through the skies. He was condemned by his superiors. His writings were hidden, declared heresy. Yet they survive, fragments in libraries, pages smudged with ink and ash. If the storm is a remnant of war, what war was it? Not one of tribes or nations, but something greater, something beyond human memory. Some say it was the war between heaven and earth itself. The gods of the sky sought to rule, the spirits of the land resisted, and their conflict split the world. Others believe it was a war between gods and beings beyond the sky, enemies from the stars, their battle spilling into our world. Each bolt of lightning is not weather, but weapon. Each flash of strike in a war that never truly ended. It is a terrifying thought that what we see each night is not natural, not chance, but battle. That above us, in every flicker of light, in every crack across the heavens, the war continues. Frozen but not ended. Waiting. The people who live beneath the storm knew it. They felt it in their bones, in their dreams. Children born beneath its flashes carried visions they could not explain. Hunters swore they heard battle cries in the thunder, saw armies marching in the lightning. Shamans spoke of the storm as if it were alive, not only alive, but at war with itself. And perhaps that is why those who come too close are broken. Perhaps that is why conquistadors saw faces in the flashes, why soldiers woke screaming of drowned voices. For to look into the storm is to look into a war that never ceased, a war too vast for human eyes to bear. In the archives of Spain, buried deep, there lies a stranger record still. A manuscript written not by a priest, not by a soldier, but by a man whose name is half erased. He described a night camped by the lake, staring into the storm. He wrote of visions, two figures locked in combat, their bodies made of fire and shadow. He said the lightning was not random, but deliberate, each strike aimed, each flash a weapon. He believed he was witnessing the continuation of a war that began before mankind, a war never meant for human eyes. At the end of his writing, he confessed something chilling, that as he stared into the storm, he felt it stare back, that the war was not only above him, but within him, that each flash tore something from his soul. His manuscript was marked forbidden. The church declared it madness, but his final line was never erased. The storm was never meant for us. It was never meant for Earth. For centuries, the storm above Lake Maracaibo burned as a riddle no one could solve. Priests called it divine punishment. Indigenous tribes whispered it was war between spirits. Conquistadors wrote of faces in the lightning. Scientists measured its fury and called it weather. But even they admitted unease. The storm was too precise, too eternal, too alive. Still, the world advanced. Empires crumbled. Machines replaced sails. Radios whispered across oceans. And with every new century came new minds who believed they could finally pierce the storm's secret. Explorers, scientists, wanderers, all drawn to the same glowing heart, all chasing the same forbidden truth. What lies at the storm's center? They came with instruments and compasses, cameras and notebooks. They came armed with faith and reason, believing that numbers could explain what myth and terror could not. But when they reached the storm's heart, reason betrayed them. The first modern expeditions set out in the 20th century. Teams of geographers and scientists traveled by boat, eager to map the storm's origin. They expected turbulence, heavy rain, roaring thunder. Instead, they found something stranger. As their boats entered the storm's glow, their instruments failed. Compasses spun endlessly, needles turning without direction. Radios hissed with static, even when tuned to silence. Watches stopped, their hands frozen in place. The deeper they went, the more the world itself seemed to lose its order. One explorer wrote in his journal that the lake no longer felt like water. The waves moved, but not with the wind. They shifted against rhythm, as though pulled by some unseen hand. He dipped his fingers into the surface and swore it felt colder than ice. Yet when he lifted his hand, steam rose as if it burned. He could not explain it. He stopped trying. Lightning fell around them, yet always just out of reach. Bolts carved the air in violent bursts, striking close enough to blind, close enough to shake the bones, yet never touching the boats themselves. Again and again, the lightning drew a line, a circle around the explorers, closing them in but never striking them down. It was as if the storm itself was watching, not destroying, not sparing, testing. One man whispered that the storm had boundaries, that they were no longer on a lake but inside a cage, its bars made of fire. The teams pressed forward. They believed the center held the answer. They had studied maps, journals, legends. All of them pointed to the same place, a heart hidden in the marshes where the Catatumbo River meets the lake. If they could reach it, perhaps the mystery would break. But as they drew nearer, the air thickened. Breathing became heavy, lungs burning with every inhale. Men collapsed to their knees, clutching their chests as though drowning on land. Some vomited, others screamed that their veins were on fire. Still, the captains ordered them forward. Curiosity is a crueler master than mercy. At the center, compasses spun so wildly they tore from their casings. Cameras captured nothing but white light, as though the storm itself refused to be recorded. And yet the explorers swore that in the flashes they saw shapes, towers rising from the lake, gates carved of flame, eyes staring down through the sky. One scientist wrote in his log, "It is not random. The storm is deliberate. It breathes. It listens. It waits." The next page was blank. He never wrote again. Other expeditions followed. Some returned half-broken, their journals filled with trembling words. Others never returned at all. A Venezuelan team in the 1950s claimed they had reached the true epicenter. They described a sudden stillness in the air, a silence beneath the lightning. For one brief moment, the storm seemed to hold its breath. The lake grew glassy, perfectly still, and in its reflection they saw not themselves, but a city vast, burning, floating upside down beneath the water. They radioed their discovery to shore. Their voices crackled through static, shouting of structures and lights. Then the transmission ended in a single word: open. The team was never seen again. In the 1970s, another group tried with helicopters. They believed that approaching from the air would break the storm's curse. Machines stronger than men, rotors slicing through lightning, instruments guiding them true. But the sky betrayed them too. As they neared the epicenter, their gauges froze. Altimeters spun. Fuel levels dropped to zero, though their tanks were full. The pilots screamed that the storm was pulling them down. Witnesses from the shore saw their helicopters vanish into the glow, swallowed in silence. No wreckage was ever found. It is easy, from afar, to dismiss these accounts as failures of man and machine. Instruments fail. Pilots err. Explorers lose themselves in myth. But the consistency of their words tells another story. Compasses spin. Radios hiss. The storm grows deliberate the closer you draw. Always the same. Always a line that cannot be crossed. Those who came back alive speak of it the same way. They say the storm has an eye. A place where the lightning bends, where the fury folds inward, where something waits. To approach, it is to be invited. To enter, it is to never return. One explorer, aged and broken, confessed before his death, "It does not want to kill us. It wants us to open it." What does that mean, to open the storm? Legends say the lightning is not a cage, but a seal that was placed here to lock something inside, a force that does not belong to this world. Each flash is not chaos. but ritual a constant renewing of the prison. If the storm ever ceases, the seal would break. Scientists dismiss this, but even they cannot explain why the storm never strikes its heart, why it avoids its own center as though protecting it, why every expedition that crosses the line never comes back. The Bari say the storm is the war of gods. The Wayus say it is punishment. The conquistadors said it was alive. But perhaps all were right. Perhaps the storm is all these things at once, alive, eternal, fighting, watching. And perhaps the center is not a place at all, but a doorway. The most chilling account comes from 2003. A team of Venezuelan researchers launched an expedition with modern equipment, determined to prove the storm's true nature. They carried digital compasses, satellite tracking, reinforced boats. They believed technology would shield them from myth. For 3 nights, they camped near the marsh. Instruments failed, as always, but they pressed onward. On the 4th night, their radio sparked alive with panic. Static screamed across the airwaves. A voice shouted through, "It's not a storm. It's an opening." The transmission cut. The next day, their base camp found no trace of them. Their boats were gone. Their gear was gone. Only the radio remained, still wet from rain, repeating the same static over and over, as if the storm itself had swallowed their voices. The final recording survives. Amid the static, a phrase repeats, barely audible, trembling. It opened. What opened, no one knows. Was it the sky? The water? The storm itself? Or was it something that has waited all this time, locked within the lightning, longing to be free? The eye of the storm remains unseen, untouched, uncrossed. It waits each night, burning with fury, daring men to enter. And still they come, drawn by curiosity, by obsession, by the hope that they will be the ones to solve it. But those who have seen the glow up close know better. The storm is not a riddle to be solved. It is a door, and someday someone will open it. The storm above Lake Maracaibo is a storm of light. Night after night, thousands of bolts tear the sky apart. White fire splits the heavens. Violet streaks curl against the clouds. Flashes carve shadows into the water like scars across glass. Yet for all its fury, for all its fire, for all its violence, there is one thing missing. The sound. Thunder. Every storm across the world sings with thunder. It follows lightning like a shadow follows a man. It rolls across hills, shakes the earth, rattles windows. It is the voice of the sky, the deep growl that proves the heavens are alive. But here, in Maracaibo, there is silence. Lightning burns above the lake every 2 seconds, sometimes more. For 10 hours each night, the sky is shredded by light. By morning, 10,000 bolts may fall. Yet the thunder never arrives. Or if it does, it is hushed, swallowed, devoured before it can reach human ears. It is not only strange, it is unnatural. Fishermen who have spent lifetimes on the lake speak of this silence with unease. They cast their nets beneath the storm, their faces illuminated by endless flashes, and they wait for the sound that never comes. Some say the silence is more frightening than thunder itself. Thunder is the answer of the sky. Without it, the lightning feels unfinished. Each strike falls, and the world waits to hear its voice, but the voice is gone. The elders whisper that the sound is not gone at all. It is taken, stolen, fed upon. They believe something beneath the waters swallows the thunder before it can be heard. Something vast, something ancient, something that feeds not on flesh but on sound. A creature, a god, a wound. No one agrees, but all agree on one truth. The thunder belongs to the lake now. Scientists tried to explain it. They said the marshes absorb the sound, that the air is too thick, that the shape of the land muffles the thunder before it travels. They spoke of echoes lost in mist, of atmosphere swallowing vibration. But the fishermen laugh at this. They say sound travels far across the water. They say they have heard whispers carry across the lake in the dead of night, voices from boats miles away. They know the storm is not muted by land or air. Something else is happening, something the scientists refuse to name. There is an old Bari legend about a hunter who lived by the lake. One night, the storm grew too violent, its silence too heavy. He called out into the lightning, shouting that the sky was weak without its voice. He mocked it, daring the gods to answer. When morning came, he was gone. Only his canoe remained, floating in still water. The elders said the lake had taken him, that he had mocked the silence and been swallowed for it. And ever since, no one dares to call out during the lightning. Voices carry, and voices are heard. Divers have long avoided the center of the storm. The water there is treacherous, heavy with reeds and shifting currents. But some, drawn by obsession or desperation, have descended. Most return shaken, pale, unwilling to speak. But fragments of their words remain. One diver said that as he went deeper, the silence grew heavier. His ears rang, though there was no sound. His heartbeat echoed in his skull, each thump louder than the world around him. He felt as though he had been buried alive, trapped not in water, but in silence itself. When he surfaced, he swore he would never return. Another diver confessed that he heard thunder beneath the waves, not muffled, not faint, but booming, rolling across the lake bed as if the storm had been inverted. He said it shook the water around him, rattled his bones. Yet no one on the surface heard a thing. If thunder falls into the lake and is trapped there, what else is trapped with it? The Wayuu speak of the endless echo as a prison. They believe the storm is not only fire, but sound. That when the gods fought their war in the sky, their cries were locked beneath the water. The lightning above is their fury. The silence below is their grief. And in that grief, something was born. They tell of a creature without form, a being that feeds on sound, growing stronger each time thunder falls and vanishes. They call it the Drowned One. Some believe it is a spirit of the lake, bound to silence forever. Others say it is the shadow of a god, chained below, hungry for release. Fishermen whisper that on nights when the storm grows fiercest, you can hear it, not with ears, but in your chest, a low hum, vibrating through the water, rattling the wood of their boats. Some weep when they feel it, convinced it is the voice of the drowned, begging to be remembered. Modern expeditions with microphones and hydrophones try to capture this mystery. They lowered instruments into the water, hoping to record the silence, to measure it, to explain it. At first, their recordings caught nothing but static. But when the lightning grew stronger, the machines began to shake. What they recorded was not silence. It was a sound too deep for ears to hear, a frequency below the edge of perception. A roar stretched thin, as though thunder was being dragged downward into infinity. One researcher played the recording at high speed, compressing hours into minutes. What emerged was not a roar, but rhythm. Pulses, almost words. He played it once for his colleagues, then destroyed the tape. He refused to speak of it again. But the fishermen already knew. They have always known. They say the storm is not above and the silence is not below. They are the same. The lightning is only half the truth. The other half waits beneath the water, unseen, unheard, but never gone. Together they form the storm. Fire above, echo below. One cannot exist without the other. And that is why the storm never ends. There is a story, half forgotten, of a diver who ignored the warnings. He wanted to know. He tied stones to his body, sank deep into the water, and forced himself into the heart of the storm silence. For minutes, he did not move. The fishermen above watched, waiting. Lightning flashed again and again, yet no thunder followed. When the diver surfaced, he did not speak. His eyes were wide, his body trembling. He clawed at the air as if still drowning. Then, with a scream that split the night, he shouted what he had seen. Not darkness, not silence, but cities. Cities burning with fire beneath the waves. The storm above Lake Maracaibo was once only the sky's burden, its fury chained to the clouds and the water. Lightning struck, fire burned, silence devoured thunder, and then morning came. But over time, the storm was no longer content to remain above. It reached downward, seeping into the earth, into the water, into the very bones of those who live beneath it. At first, no one noticed. Fishermen cast their nets as they always had. Children laughed and played along the shores, their faces glowing with the flashes of light. Villages rose and fell, living beneath the storm as their ancestors had for centuries. But slowly, something began to change. The storm did not simply illuminate the sky. It illuminated their minds. And once it entered, it never left. In the villages nearest the marshes, illness began to grow. It was not a sickness of the body alone. It began in the nights, in the hours when the storm burned brightest. Children woke screaming from dreams they could not describe. Some clawed at their eyes, claiming they had seen too much light. Others curled into silence, whispering of faces staring down at them from the sky. The elders said it was the storm feeding on their sleep, that each bolt carried something more than light, a residue, an energy, a hunger. They warned the parents not to let children sleep near the windows, not to let the lightning touch their eyes. But curtains did little. The storm always found a way. Mothers told of sons who stopped sleeping altogether, their eyes wide, red, and hollow, yet still refusing to close. Fathers told of daughters who began to hum strange songs in the night, melodies they had never learned. And when asked where the songs came from, the children only replied, "The storm taught us." Illness spread, not fevers, not coughs, but fractures of the mind. Men who once knew the waters like the backs of their hands suddenly rowed their boats into rocks, claiming the lake itself had shifted. Women forgot their own names, staring at their reflections in the water as though looking at strangers. Entire families abandoned their homes, wandering into the marsh without food, as though called by voices only they could hear. When their bodies were found days later, they showed no wounds, no signs of struggle, only eyes wide open, mouths frozen in half-formed words, as if they had died mid-sentence. The villagers began to speak of the curse openly. They said the storm was no longer satisfied with the sky. It was sinking into the earth, spreading like a poison. Some called it the second lightning, the unseen strike that did not burn the skin but split the mind. Others called it the silent fire, claiming it entered the bones like heat and never left. Elders gathered the people in the night and told them not to dream. They warned that the storm was searching for something in their sleep, pulling images from their minds, replacing them with its own. But no one can command the human heart. Dreams still came, and the dreams grew darker. People dreamed of landscapes that did not exist, mountains of glass, seas of fire, towers that reached into black skies. They dreamed of cities drowned beneath waves, glowing faintly in the flashes of lightning. They dreamed of battles fought not with swords, but with storms. And in each dream, the storm was there, always watching, always pulling them deeper. A woman named Elira dreamed of her dead husband, standing at the edge of the lake, his face glowing with white fire. He whispered to her, telling her to join him. When she woke, she walked into the water and never returned. Her neighbors said she had not drowned. She had gone where the storm wanted her to go. A fisherman named Raphael dreamed of maps, endless maps drawn across his skin, rivers that curve in ways no river on earth should, islands floating in seas of black flame. When he woke, his arms were covered in scratches, as though he had carved the maps into himself. He died weeks later, his body twisted, his eyes staring upward, unblinking, as though following the lightning to its source. The children were the most vulnerable. Their minds, still soft, still open, became windows the storm could enter most easily. Teachers in the villages told of students who stopped listening, staring at the sky, even in daylight. They filled their slates not with numbers or letters, but with symbols no one recognized. Circles crossed with jagged lines, spirals that never ended, shapes that seemed to move even after the children stopped drawing them. One teacher burned the slates, terrified of the marks. That night, her home caught fire without flame. The walls glowed white. Her furniture cracked as though struck by lightning, though the storm had not touched the village. She fled, and when she returned the next day, her house was gone. Only a circle of blackened earth remained, carved perfectly into the ground. The storm was spreading. not only above, not only within dreams, but into the villages themselves. Chickens refused to lay eggs. Dogs barked endlessly at the sky. Cows were found dead in fields, their bodies unburned but their bones scorched from the inside, as though lightning had struck them without touching their skin. Priests were called, but their prayers faltered. The churches shook with every flash. Crucifixes on the walls trembled as though alive. One priest collapsed mid-sermon, crying that he saw angels with burning wings circling the storm. He never spoke again. The villagers no longer asked whether it was natural. They asked only how long before the storm consumed them all. Elders gathered the people and told them the truth they had always feared. The storm was not only alive, it was hungry, and it had learned to feed. It fed on dreams. It fed on voices. It fed on memory itself. Each night it grew stronger, pulling pieces of the living into itself. They said it was weaving a new world from what it consumed. That the maps the children drew, the songs they sang, the visions in their sleep, they were not fantasy. They were pieces of a place the storm was building, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. A place that had never existed on Earth. Then came the boy. His name was Mateo, 10 years old, quiet, withdrawn, a child who spoke little and listened much. For weeks, he had been restless, sketching in the dirt, on walls, on scraps of paper. His parents scolded him, thinking it mischief. But the sketches grew more detailed, more precise, until finally, one morning, the villagers gathered to see what he had drawn. Maps, dozens of them. Entire continents no one recognized, lands marked with mountains and rivers and seas. Cities drawn with towers taller than any known, streets winding in impossible patterns. Each map was different, but all shared one thing. The storm was there, always at the center, drawn as a circle broken by jagged lines, radiating outward like veins of fire. The elders stared in silence. These were not the scribbles of a child. They were detailed, deliberate, cartography no boy could have invented. Some maps even bore words in languages no one in the village spoke. When asked where he learned to draw them, Mateo only whispered, "The storm shows me." And then, with tears in his eyes, he added, "They are real." For centuries, the storm above Lake Maracaibo belonged to myth. It was the wrath of gods, the battle of spirits, the sorrow of drowned souls. Tribes feared it. Conquistadors cursed it. Villagers whispered of its curse spreading through their dreams. Yet with the rise of the modern world, a new kind of witness arrived. They did not come with crosses or swords, but with machines. The scientists, they came armed with tools of reason, with equations and instruments, with faith in the measurable world. They believed the storm could be captured in numbers, explained with formulas reduced to data. They called it a laboratory written in the sky. But the storm was not a willing subject. And soon, they discovered that reason breaks the same way minds do. The first teams arrived in the early 20th century, carrying barometers, cameras, and crude recorders. They charted the flashes, timing each one, counting the seconds between bolts. What they found was astonishing. The lightning was not random. It pulsed in patterns, steady and relentless, like the ticking of a clock. No storm on Earth behaved this way. At first, they declared it coincidence. But as the nights stretched into months, they saw it continue, unbroken. A rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat. The storm, they realized, was alive in more ways than myth had ever claimed. By the mid-20th century, with radios and spectrometers, teams returned. They measured ozone, methane, humidity, atmospheric pressure. Every chart pointed to the same truth. The storm should not exist. No natural conditions could sustain it every night for centuries. The methane in the marsh was insufficient, the winds inconsistent. And yet the storm continued, stronger than any model could predict. One researcher famously wrote, "By all accounts, this storm should have died 1,000 years ago, and yet it burns." But the deeper they measured, the stranger the results became. In the 1970s, a Venezuelan team recorded spikes of ozone so high they rivaled the levels produced by industrial explosions. Yet these spikes vanished as soon as they were recorded, never consistent, never repeatable. The data defied replication. It was as if the storm itself changed its signature the moment it was observed. In the 1980s, an international expedition brought equipment meant to trace electrical discharge. Their instruments recorded energy surges stronger than any lightning strike ever measured, bolts that should have vaporized entire villages. But no such destruction was seen. The storm produced power beyond comprehension, yet the world remained intact, as though the energy was not released, but redirected. One scientist, trembling as he reviewed the data, whispered to his colleagues, "This is not discharge. This is transfer." When pressed to explain, he refused. He abandoned the project, his notes destroyed. By the late 20th century, with satellites orbiting the Earth, the storm was studied from above. Cameras captured its glow, visible from space, a constant flicker unlike anything else on the planet. Satellites tracked its lightning strikes and discovered something chilling. The bolts did not scatter randomly. They aligned. Across months of observation, the lightning strikes fell in patterns. Shapes, lines that curved like symbols, repeating across weeks, months, years. Some dismissed it as coincidence, but others saw more. One physicist traced the patterns and compared them to ancient carvings found in Venezuelan caves. The match was undeniable. The lightning was writing the same symbols carved by human hands thousands of years ago. When she presented her findings, she was silenced. Her funding cut, her files erased. She left Venezuela and never returned. But before she vanished into obscurity, she left a single note in the margins of her last report. The storm is not random. It is speaking. And then came the disappearances. In the 1990s, a team of 6 researchers set up camp near the Catatumbo marshes. They had computers, weather balloons, infrared cameras. They recorded for weeks, sending back streams of data. Then, one night, their transmissions ceased. A rescue team found their camp abandoned. Tents still standing, food untouched, equipment humming. But the scientists were gone. Their hard drives were empty, wiped clean. No data remained. In one tent, however, investigators found a single sheet of paper. On it was scrawled a circle broken by jagged lines. The same symbol drawn by children in the villages. The same symbol carved in ancient caves. No explanation was ever given. Those who returned from such expeditions often carried scars. Not on their bodies, but on their minds. One man, a meteorologist from Caracas, stopped speaking altogether. He spent his final years drawing lightning bolts on his walls, filling his home until every surface was covered. Another, an American researcher, spoke of whispers and static of his radio, voices that called him by name. He burned his notes before fleeing the country, claiming the storm had followed him into his dreams. It seemed the more they measured, the less they understood. Then, in the early 2000s, a team of physicists arrived with technology they believed could finally solve the riddle. They came with advanced spectrographs, quantum sensors, instruments sensitive enough to detect fluctuations in the very fabric of air. For months they worked, setting up along the shore, their eyes fixed on the endless glow. What they found broke them. Their instruments recorded energy spikes, not measured in volts, but in something else, something they struggled to name. Bursts that bent their graphs into infinity. Pulses that did not move outward, but inward, as though space itself was folding. The readings were impossible, beyond any storm, beyond any star. The storm was not releasing energy. It was consuming it. One physicist described it as a drain, a spiral pulling power not from the air, but from somewhere else. He compared it to a doorway, a passage through which energy moved, but not in ways humans could understand. When the team presented their findings, their files vanished, their servers wiped, their computers locked. Weeks later, their lead researcher was found dead in her apartment, her journals destroyed. But one page survived. On it were 3 words, "It is a doorway." The meaning was never explained. A doorway to where? To what? No one knows. Some believe the storm opens to another world, that its energy feeds not on Earth, but on something beyond. Others whisper it is not a doorway, but a lock, that what lies inside is not meant to escape, and the storm burns to hold it back. Yet still the scientists come, drawn not by faith, not by fear, but by obsession. They measure, they record, they vanish. Each generation convinced they will solve it, each generation broken by it. The storm does not give answers. It only deepens questions. And every time an instrument fails, every time data erases itself, every time a researcher disappears, the same truth emerges. The storm is not ours. It does not belong to this world. It is a doorway. The storm above Lake Maracaibo had burned for centuries without pause. It flashed and flickered like a heart that never tired, a rhythm as eternal as time itself. Villagers grew old beneath it, conquistadors cursed it, scientists measured it, and still it endured. Its fire was constant, its pattern steady, its silence unbroken. But there came a time when the storm changed. It began subtly, too faint to be noticed by the untrained eye. Fishermen casting their nets swore the lightning no longer fell at random. They whispered that the bolts struck in clusters, repeating in strange rhythms, like drum beats echoing from the sky. At first, the villagers dismissed it as imagination. The storm had always been strange, but then they began to see the shapes. Lightning no longer split the heavens carelessly. It bent into angles, curved into arcs, carved lines that seemed deliberate. At first, they looked like jagged cracks, meaningless fractures of light. But soon, the patterns became undeniable. The bolts drew symbols, spirals, circles, lines that repeated across nights. They appeared, vanished, and appeared again, always the same. The elders were the first to recognize them. They had seen such marks before, not in the sky, but on stone. Symbols carved into the walls of caves, etched into forgotten ruins scattered across Venezuela's wild interior. Ancient carvings of people long vanished, now repeated in the sky. Word spread quickly through the villages. Children pointed upward, shouting that the sky was writing. Mothers clutched their children close, whispering that the storm was finally speaking aloud. Elders gathered in silence, their faces grim. They knew the symbols. They had traced them with their hands, painted them on their bodies in rituals. They were warnings. One elder whispered, "The storm remembers." Another replied, "No, it is not remembering. It is calling." Scientists returned, eager to capture the phenomenon. They brought cameras, high-speed lenses, software to track the lightning's paths. They recorded frame after frame, and when they layered the images together, the truth could no longer be denied. The bolts formed coherent shapes, not random, not coincidence. Language. The patterns matched petroglyphs found on cliffs along the Orinoco River, markings believed to predate written history. Spirals thought to represent the sun, lines thought to represent rivers, circles thought to represent gateways. But in the lightning, the symbols were sharper, more defined, as though the storm had not inspired the carvings, but had taught them. A Venezuelan archaeologist declared the storm was an ancient library, writing the forgotten history of the land and fire. A physicist countered that it was a code, a repeating signal, a communication sent to something beyond the earth. Neither could explain why. After centuries of silence, the storm had begun to write again. The villages grew restless. People who had long lived in uneasy truce with the storm began to fear its awakening. Nightmares grew darker. The sick grew sicker. Children no longer sang songs to the storm, but muttered the symbols aloud, as though reciting lessons whispered into their ears. One boy carved the symbols into wood over and over until his hands bled. When asked what they meant, he only answered, "They are doors." Another child, no older than 7, looked to her mother during a flash and said calmly, "They are not writing for us. They are writing for them." When asked who they were, she could not answer. She only cried, and then came the summoning. The lightning began to strike in clusters, not across the lake, but directly above the marshes. Each night, the bolts grew closer together until they formed blazing circles of fire in the clouds. Witnesses said it looked like an eye opening above them, a great lid peeling back to stare down upon the world. The circles pulsed. Flashes echoed in rhythms, too precise to be chance. The scientists recorded the pulses, analyzed the timing. When converted to sound, the storm's rhythm formed tones, low hums, rising notes, descending patterns. A melody. The storm was singing. One night, the fishermen swore they heard voices in the song. Not human, not animal, but something vast, layered, like the voices of thousands speaking as one. They could not understand the words, yet they felt them in their bones. Some wept, some fled, some dropped to their knees in worship. A priest who heard the storm's song wrote in his journal, "It is not warning us. It is summoning something." Days later, the priest vanished. His journal was found abandoned at the edge of the lake, its pages damp and smudged, but his words intact. Then, for the first time in centuries, the storm changed again. One night, the lightning slowed. The sky, once alive with fire every 2 seconds, grew quiet. The villagers waited, staring upward, certain the next flash would come. But minutes passed, hours. The heavens were still. No lightning, no fire, no storm. The people stood in silence, staring in night they had never known. True darkness spread across the lake, the stars shining sharp and cold. 4 generations, the storm had been their only night light, their only sky. Now it was gone. Some cried in relief, believing the curse had lifted. Others trembled in fear, convinced the silence was worse than the fire. For silence is never empty. Silence is waiting. All night, the lake remained still. No bolts, no flashes, no endless fire. The villages sat awake, sleepless, eyes wide, listening for thunder that never came. Some said they heard whispers in the silence. Others claimed they felt the ground tremble, as though something beneath the water was stirring. By dawn, many prayed the storm would return. Better the fire above than the silence below. And at sunrise, their prayers were answered. The storm returned, but it was stronger. The lightning struck with renewed fury, brighter than any night before. Bolts split the lake in two, burning the water white. Flashes stretched higher into the sky, reaching farther, their light visible across entire countries. The patterns grew sharper, symbols blazing clearer, their meaning undeniable. The storm had slept for one night, and in that silence, it had changed. It had awakened. The storm had awakened. For one night, it fell silent, leaving the lake in a darkness not seen for centuries. When dawn came, it returned in fury, brighter, stronger, hungrier. The lightning no longer felt like nature, no longer like chance. It felt deliberate. It carved symbols into the sky, burned marks into the lake, and sang in rhythms no human could deny. The people of the villages whispered what no one wanted to say. The storm was no longer only a storm. It was something else. And when it awakened, the world beneath it began to fall apart. Chaos spread first through the villages. Families who had endured generations beneath the lightning could no longer bear its new fury. Children screamed through sleepless nights, their dreams torn open by visions of burning cities and endless fire. Elders who had once claimed to understand the storm fell silent, refusing to speak, their eyes hollow, their voices gone. Entire families packed their belongings and fled into the mountains. Others boarded boats and vanished downriver, abandoning their homes to rot beneath the storm's glow. Villages emptied, houses left dark, crops untended. For centuries, the storm had been endured, but now was no longer endurable. Those who remained did so for reasons not of survival, but of obsession. Explorers, scientists, and wanderers from distant countries gathered near the lake, drawn by rumors of symbols in the lightning, of silence that shook the earth, of visions and dreams. They came with notebooks and cameras, with maps and machines. They believed they had arrived at the moment the storm would finally reveal itself, that they would witness what no generation before them had seen. But the closer they drew to the storm's heart, the more it consumed them. At first, they worked together, sharing observations, pooling data. They timed the flashes, recorded the patterns, traced the symbols. Some believed the storm was communication, a message written across the sky. Others declared it was a code, a language to be deciphered. Then came the dreams. They began quietly. A few muttered in their sleep, calling out names that were not their own. Others woke with scratches on their arms, spirals, and circles carved unconsciously into their skin. Soon, entire camps were filled with screams at night. Men and women clawing at their eyes, shouting that the storm was inside them. In the mornings, they argued. Some swore the storm had shown them the future. Cities in ruins, seas swallowing coasts, towers collapsing in fire. They believed the storm was a prophet, revealing what was to come. Others spat in their faces, insisting the visions were lies, that the storm was feeding on their souls, draining them of memory and sanity. The camp fractured. Trust dissolved. One group broke away, declaring they would remain no matter the cost. They believed the storm had chosen them, that they had been called as witnesses to its final revelation. Another group fled into the marshes, vowing never to look at the lightning again. Neither group returned whole. Betrayal spread like a shadow. Supplies vanished. Journals were stolen. Explorers accused one another of hiding discoveries, of secretly aligning with the storm itself. Some swore their companions were no longer human, that their faces shifted in the flashes, eyes glowing white, mouths whispering words not of this world. One night, two men argued over a map. One claimed the storm had shown him a new land, drawn in fire across the clouds. The other insisted it was madness, a trick of exhaustion. The fight ended in blood. By morning, only one man remained, the map clenched in his fist. When asked what he had seen, he only replied, "The storm drew it for me. It is real." But no one ever found the land he described. Madness spread faster than illness. Explorers wandered into the marshes, speaking to themselves, following voices no one else could hear. Scientists destroyed their own instruments, screaming that numbers were lies, that the truth was in the fire, not in equations. Some stopped eating, claiming the storm would feed them. Others refused to sleep, fearing the dreams. And always the storm flashed above them, silent, patient, watching. Tragedy consumed the few who remained near the lake. A young woman from Caracas, who had come to study the lightning's chemistry, walked calmly into the water one night. She whispered that she had been chosen to cross into the storm's world. Her colleagues screamed, begging her to return, but she smiled as the waves closed over her head. Her body was never found. A man from Spain filled pages of his journal with strange diagrams, towers and spirals, endless gates. He claimed the storm was building something through them, using human minds as its architects. When his companions tried to take the pages, he set them alight, laughing as the fire consumed them. He walked into the marsh and did not return. Another, an American, dragged his tent into the open and demanded the lightning strike him. He screamed at the sky to take him, to reveal its truth. The storm obliged. His body was found the next morning, not burned, not broken, but hollow, his eyes wide open, his chest empty, as though something inside had been taken. Of all the survivors, few remained sane enough to write. Their words tell of a slow unraveling, not of the storm alone, but of themselves. One survivor wrote, "We turned against each other because the storm wanted it. It fed on our hatred, our fear, our doubt. It does not strike us because it does not need to. We destroy ourselves for it." Another wrote, "The storm shows me cities not yet built. I see towers of glass, oceans boiling, skies torn open. It is not warning me. It is creating them inside me." And the final survivor of one expedition, found years later wandering the mountains, whispered only one sentence again and again until the day he died. "The storm is not above us. It is beneath us." In the end, the lake grew quiet of voices. The villages were abandoned. The explorers were gone. Only the storm remained, burning stronger than ever, its silence louder than thunder, its light writing messages no one left alive could read. The last to leave were not priests or scientists, but ordinary people. Mothers clutching their children, fathers dragging their families away from the lake. They did not carry books, they did not carry instruments. They carried only fear and the memory of what they had seen. And on the shores, etched into a stone near the water's edge, a final message was found. The letters carved deep, desperate, the last act of hands trembling with death. It read, "The storm is not above us. It is beneath us." The storm of Lake Maracaibo still burns. After centuries of whispers, legends, journals, maps, betrayals, and disappearances, it endures. Night after night, lightning splits the heavens above Venezuela, flickering like the pulse of a living world. It has been called a natural wonder, a curse, a god, a prison, a doorway. Yet after all this time, one truth remains: no one knows. In the modern world of satellites and supercomputers, the storm continues to defy answers. Instruments orbiting the Earth record its glow every evening, a constant flicker visible even from space. To pilots flying across the Caribbean, it is still a beacon, a lighthouse written in fire, guiding their paths through the night. To fishermen still casting nets beneath its glow, it is both companion and predator, blessing and curse. But to those who know its history, who remember the tribes, the conquistadors, the scientists who vanished into its silence, the storm is more than light. It is a watcher. For the people of the world, the storm has become a curiosity. Tourists travel to see it. Cameras flash as lightning splits the sky, and travel guides call it the lightning that never sleeps. Scientists stand beside them, notebooks in hand, assuring them it is methane, humidity, and wind. But those who live beneath it do not smile. They bow their heads. They whisper prayers. They close their curtains at night and warn their children not to look too long. Because for them, the storm is not entertainment. It is not tourism. It is not a curiosity. It is life and death. It is the shadow that has followed them for generations, the fire that has burned across every memory, every dream. And they know what outsiders do not: that the storm changes, that it remembers, that it takes. Even now, in the age of technology, stories spread. A fisherman wakes screaming, claiming he saw drowned cities glowing beneath the water. A child sketches maps of lands no one recognizes. A pilot swears his instruments went dead the moment he flew across the storm center. And then there are the silences. Nights when the lightning falters, slowing, pausing, as if holding its breath. On those nights, the villages grow still. People refuse to sleep. They sit awake in silence, waiting, dreading. Because when the storm pauses, it always returns with greater fury. And each return feels like a warning. Historians still debate whether the storm is natural or supernatural. Some call it a scar of the earth itself, a wound that never healed, an eternal discharge of the planet's fury. Others say it is supernatural, a war of gods or spirits trapped in endless battle. Scientists argue over equations, but even their numbers falter. The data contradicts itself. The instruments erase themselves. No matter how modern the tools, the storm resists being measured. It resists being known. It is as though it chooses what to reveal. And perhaps that is the truest mystery of all. For centuries, the storm has been constant, and yet has also changed. It has written symbols across the sky. It has silenced itself for a single night. It has taken minds, dreams, souls. It has burned brighter and brighter, as though waiting for something. What does it wait for? Some believe it waits for us. That humanity itself is part of its design. That our minds are pieces in its puzzle. Our dreams bricks in its hidden city. Others believe it waits for the world beyond, sending its message into the heavens, calling out to something we cannot see. And some whisper the storm does not wait at all. It watches. In the villages that still cling to the lake, the people speak of the storm with quiet resignation. They endure it, as their ancestors did. They raise their children beneath it, bury their dead in its glow, live each day knowing that the sky above them may never change. One elder, when asked why he remained, gave a simple answer. The storm has watched us for centuries. If we leave, it will follow. His words echo the conquistadors who swore the storm followed them across oceans, the scientists who claimed its silence haunted their dreams, the survivors who whispered it was not above, but beneath. If the storm is eternal, then there may be no escaping it. And so, in the present day, the storm continues. Satellites capture it, pilots use it, tourists marvel at it, scientists measure it, locals endure it, and still, no answer is found. Is it natural? Is it supernatural? Is it a scar, a prison, a doorway? The truth may never be known. But perhaps the truth is not the point. Perhaps the storm was never meant to be solved. Perhaps its purpose is not to be explained, but to endure. To remind us that not everything can be tamed by reason. Not everything can be mapped. Not everything can be measured. That some forces of the world remain greater than us, older than us, untouched by us. Perhaps the storm is a mirror, reflecting our arrogance, our fear, our endless need to know. Perhaps it watches not because it wants us, but because it does not care. And so it burns. It burned before the Bari sang their rituals. It burned before the conquistadors wrote of faces in the lightning. It burned before explorers vanished, before scientists measured, before satellites captured its glow. It burned before memory, and it will burn long after the villages are gone, long after the last fisherman casts his net, long after the last scientist erases her files, long after the last voice whispers its name, long after we vanish into the same silence it has always carried. The storm will remain. It has burned for centuries, and it may burn long after the last human vanishes. A reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only endured. The storm endures. It has outlasted kings, tribes, empires, and explorers. It has taken the voices of those who tried to name it and silenced the instruments of those who tried to measure it. And even now, it still burns, a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only endured. But perhaps that is why we return to stories like this. Because deep down, we are drawn to the questions without answers, to the shadows that will not lift, to the echoes that reach us from a time before memory. The storm of Maracaibo is only one of many. The world holds countless scars, hidden fires, cursed places, and forgotten cities waiting to be remembered. If you felt the weight of this tale, if you carry its silence with you even now, then stay with us. There are more mysteries that demand to be told. Like this video, share it with those who seek the strange and the unseen, and let your voice join the circle by leaving a comment below. And if you wish to continue this journey into the world's most powerful, painful, and unforgettable secrets, subscribe now, because the storm will keep burning, and so will the stories.